Okay, the hour is 6 p.m. Having arrived, I'm going to call to order this regular meeting of the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee. This meeting is being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel. The video is also posted on the city website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Copies of the printed agenda are available in the wall pockets as you enter the meeting room. The public and other city councilors will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda items under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. I will not recognize an individual a second time until everyone who wishes to speak has had a chance to do so. Anyone who wishes to address the committee is asked to go to one of the microphones and identify themselves by name and address prior to speaking. The minute taker is listening in, so ask that you identify yourself so she can get the minutes right. I will call to order this special meeting, or this meeting of the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee, and declare a quorum present. No one has requested to participate by Zoom, so we're ready to go. We have our first agenda meeting after our break for the summer, so for a little rusty getting started, we'll get in sync here pretty quick. Item number 1 is a communication from Councilor Randy Filio. Councilor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Randy Filio, Keene City Council. As per my letter that I've submitted, basically what I'm looking for is a representative from Spectrum Cable to attend to explain to us on the council and to all their subscribers out there as to why the cable service seems to be so poor lately. This wasn't just a case of storms or bad weather. This is happening all over Keene, no matter what the weather is. Obviously, as far as world events go, this isn't earth-shattering, but it is a service that people pay for, and people expect a service. It's as simple as that. And I think the only thing worse lately than Spectrum cable service has been Spectrum's customer service. Because when anybody calls, it's always, we don't see a problem in your area, or unplug your box and plug it back in. And it's kind of repeated over and over again. Now, since I submitted this letter, obviously, I know myself and I know some of you have been contacted by a lot of our citizens saying they've had the same issues also. But I was also contacted this week by 3 Spectrum employees who want to remain anonymous, who acknowledge that Spectrum Cable is aware there's a problem in Keene and they basically just ignored it. And they're glad it's before City Council because they want it fixed. Because quite honestly, your local Spectrum people are the fall guys. They're taking it on the chin for a service that they know is inadequate. I have been told by a couple of employees that one of the problems is their equipment that's up on Beach Hill is adequately ventilated. It overheats and causes some of the freezes. I have also heard from another employee they have outdated codes in their office, and that causes a problem. Now, I can't confirm or deny any of those, but these came from Spectrum employees, and they want it to come before the council. They want Spectrum Corporate to be here, and like the constituents who have a problem, they want it fixed. So, with that said, I don't have anything further to add. I'm sure some of the people here might, but once again, all people are asking for is fix their cable service and we can move on. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask that we have a short presentation of the city's relationship with this program from our staff rep, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rebecca Landry, I almost said IT Director, Assistant City Manager, and Communications and Marketing Director. I've been working since the days we used to have a telecom committee back in the early 2000s, so have been working with this franchise agreement for quite some time. The city does have a current franchise agreement with Charter Communications, for which they have a product that everyone is familiar with called Spectrum. It used to be Time Warner Cable, so that wasn't anything the city necessarily decided to negotiate with another organization. Time Warner became Charter through a purchase. That's how we ended up with Charter and Spectrum. I will say that I don't know a lot about these complaints. I have not been involved in the receiving of the complaints. Over the course of the last 20 years, when I have received complaints, I have been able to work with Spectrum Charter Time Warner to make sure that the complaint is logged, that it is tracked and resolved. So, as you know, we have had some complaints over the years, and that's how we manage them. I want to read to you just a couple of excerpts from the current franchise agreement. Let's see, as far as complaints go, it does say that billing and complaint procedures for reporting and resolving subscriber complaints include address and telephone number of the local franchise authority. So once a year, the charter is required to send a notice to all of its subscribers identifying Keene as the franchise authority, and also letting customers know that they can complain to the franchise authority with the name and telephone number of the contact. I think also that it's important to understand that Charter is required to keep a record of all complaints for 2 years. However, verbal complaints are not required to be kept in that history. So if there are written complaints within the last 2 years, the city has the opportunity to call or request that Charter provide a history of that. The other thing I wanted to cover briefly is I've had some people ask about credit for any type of service outage, and I'll just summarize for you what it says in the franchise agreement, that if there is an outage of 24 consecutive hours or more, that subscribers are eligible for a credit if they request it. There are many times when Charter may not necessarily have a report that comes up in the morning that says customer A and customer B didn't have service yesterday. However, if a customer calls and says they didn't have service for 24 hours or more and they can confirm that, then they are eligible for a credit. That said, I'm not really sure what we're going to hear tonight. I have spoken to members of the Charter exec team. There is a VP for our region, and there is a team of managers who are ready and willing to hear what has to be said, and they are hoping to have time to follow up after they learn more about what's going on.
Be happy to hear from folks who came in tonight, hear about their experiences, what they'd like to tell us. And also, as Rebecca has indicated, there's somebody here from the TV company, so they'll be hearing it too. Rob, come on.
Bob Trudell, 671 Park Ave, Keene. I have a bad vocal cord, so it might fade in and out. I've got the same thing Randy says. You call them up and they say there's nothing in the area. It's the weather. I look outside, the sun's shining. You get to the point where some of the shows, the lips are going faster than the show is because everything starts to freeze and block up. The Red Sox, I can't use them as an example because it's not good this year. But you're watching to see them do something. It freezes up, and 2 hours has gone by before it comes back on. We had one the other day. It was out for about 4 hours. When it first started, I unplugged my TV in the box, plugged it back in, still nothing. I called. The woman says, unplug your box. I said, I already did that. She says, well, let me try to do it. Well, after a half an hour doing that, she couldn't fix it, and we got disconnected. There's no follow-up call because you're never going to call and get that woman again. I don't know why they can't call you back. I didn't say anything for a while because I'm in the service industry. Things do happen, hoping to rectify it. But after I saw Randy's thing about it, something's got to be done. You're paying good money for this. And I know a lot years ago, Teleprompter and Time Warner used to see them going around checking all the distribution ports. You don't see that in Keene like it used to be. And hopefully, maybe they've got an answer. I don't know.
Thank you. Yes, sir?
Rod Parsons, 104 Hurricane Road. Echo some of the previous comments. What I suggest is I'm willing to give you my situation in a little more detail so that we're not saying it's customer service or I have a complete package of Spectrum equipment, which is the router, the modem. I have services for their complete internet package and programming, which also includes the Red Sox. The one hit they did get was while you were out. But it also goes back to Bruins. It goes back to Celtics. Unfortunately, for someone who likes sports, it's been a good year to watch the local Boston teams. I scratch my head a little bit at why we're getting advertisement for Lee Automotive out of the middle of Maine here in Keene, but okay, if the cable worked, fine. Working. Last night, in a period from like 7:30 to 7:45, there were 4 outages where the Spectrum logo, that circle, rotates in a clockwise pattern in the middle of the screen, showed up 4 times in 15 minutes. And again, there was no storm or anything. It's just, it appears to me as if they don't have enough signal strength to get me a signal. I did a speed test last night. I'm receiving 3.7 megabytes per second download, and it was 1.9 upload. Today it's improved to 5.7 download and somewhere around 4 something upload. So it varies. Without knowing what the performance spec is for delivery of their product to my house, I can't tell you if I'm getting what I'm supposed to or not. I hope that's an issue that the Comcast folks hope to address today. Finally, just to put a quantitative note on this, my monthly bill to Spectrum is $238 per month. Compare that to other products. That could have been a car payment, and you sure would like to see that car performing a lot better than my $238 does to go for television. I think that sums up what I had in my mind, and say thank you.
Thank you, Rod. Someone else wish to add some information? Yes, sir.
My name is Bill Arnott on 44 East Surrey Road. I have several comments. Everything that's been said is accurate. I'm getting it on the East Surrey Road as well. The one thing I'm not getting is that low distribution of the internet. Mine reaches 100 all the time and 75 up. I mean, not 75 up, but somewhere around 15 or 20. So I haven't had a problem with the internet, which leads me to believe that my conclusion over the last 2 or 3 years of dealing with this issue is that we have antiquated equipment out there. I don't know where it is. I'm not a technologist. However, I deal with technology a lot. So I'm going to suggest something for the council, because I believe in solving the problem and not just hearing problems. The way to solve this is to have you pick a technology expert on cable and bill Spectrum. I think this is appropriate because I don't trust the technologists in Spectrum because they give me these lines that don't make any sense. For example, I couldn't watch a Bruins game last spring during the playoffs because it would be so pixelated I couldn't even find the people on the screen. Same with the Celtics. Last night I turned on the Red Sox. Oh, by the way, I only turn on the Red Sox now if it's in the 8th inning and they're tied or ahead. So, and even then, I said, for a while, nothing happened. I said, great, they solved the problem. Wrong, pixelation. So you cannot, as a city representative, as you are elected, assume what you hear from the product that's being delivered is accurate. In my businesses that I've had in the past, I had to hire people who knew more than me, who could then get into the problems and deal with it and give solutions. Let me also point out that I talked to one of my friends up the road, and the person asked me to relay that she had the same problems that I did. Not only that, but here we get to another crux of the situation, is how we're treated as consumers by Spectrum. In this case, she lost one of her cable boxes and called Spectrum, as you would expect, and the first thing they said was, well, we want you to bring the box into the store. Wait a minute. She said, no, you come here. So this went on for a week, if you can believe it. Now, the reason that's important is that there could be a problem within the system in the house which they are responsible for up to a point. And sure enough, they finally came out and found a grounded wire that didn't exist, and it should have been, and that's why the cable box fried. I have called many times, and I try to get through this whole chain of, or litany of the tree. You know what I'm referring to. I've learned how to shortcut a lot of them because the only person I want to speak to is a technology person in the technology department, not these public relations people who tell me, oh, unplug, or well, let me send you a signal and redo it again. Anybody hear that one? Send the signal? That's a good one. It reminds me of when I was managing an office and we had computers. The easiest way to say to somebody, if there's a problem, unplug your computer and plug it back in. Statistically, though, that's accurate, but not with Spectrum. You can unplug that all you want. You can send the signal, it doesn't change it at all. The reason I believe that it's equipment failure, or not failure because it's still producing, it's antiquated or something's wrong with it, is because all the evidence is on your screen. I checked with my brother who lives in New Milford, Connecticut, and guess what they have? The same, but not the same problems. No problems at all. Why is Keene having these problems? I don't know. So my suggestion, seriously, is get a technologist out there to check Spectrum out and have Spectrum pay for it. And by the way, if I was the head of Spectrum right now, I'd be saying anybody who's out more than 24 hours, we're not going to ask, we're going to send the rebate. That might help a little bit. Okay, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Bill. Anybody here that's right from the downtown area? Because we've heard from the west side, we've heard from out towards Surrey. Is there anybody that's in the downtown area that's has a response? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Rich Collins. I'm at Armory Street, which is 3 blocks up. And I've been dealing with this problem that all the people so far have talked about for over 2 years. It seems to be periodic. I mean, when you're trying to watch the Super Bowl, you're trying to watch sports events or a music event, it seems to be occurring. If I'm trying to watch regular TV, for the most part, I don't have a problem. But it's, and I said, you know, I said maybe it's overload on the number of people that are watching it, i.e. like a Yellowstone or one of these series that comes on at night. But it's, like I say, it's been going on for over 2 years. I've had my cable box replaced 4 times. I've had the service gentlemen, and God bless all of them that have come out to listen to me. They've been up on the ladders, checking my wires, checking the telephone poles, trying to do whatever they could to rectify the situation. And they'd give me the new box, I would plug it in. The last time I plugged it in and everything was working fine, and he disappeared, and 20 minutes later, boom, it was there again. I don't know what to tell them. They don't know what to tell me. It's something that obviously is more than just my street. And hopefully something can get resolved, because it is, it's, I don't know if they get, Spectrum's people, if they get this thing occurring on the east side of the state or not. But on this side of the state, we're lacking support. We're lacking something. I don't know if it's because we are inconsequential or what, but it needs to be seriously looked at and not just sloughed off with unplug and plug it back in. There's something more than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Take a chair if you want, sir.
I can stand. Thank you very much. My name is Chuck Cherry. I live at 31 Washington Street, right up the road here. I walk here, it's so close. And I fell in love with Keene a couple of years ago when I first visited it. And I decided last year I wanted to live here. And I have the luxury of being able to work from home. And I've been working from home long before COVID hit. So I could move here and still work full time. And I did that because I just love it. I've been here since May. I've had a few problems. First problem is that I couldn't get my internet or cable to work. And I did everything. I read all the instructions, did all the online FAQs, then I called, and it was the old unplug plug. And I'm like, well, you know, I've done that. Well, we need to make sure you've done that. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I work in IT. I may not work in your branch of IT, but I work in customer service. I know enough to know what the questions are. So I still had to go through it anyways, and I did. And they kept on going back and forth. Finally, I said, you need to get somebody out here. I said, well, we can get somebody out here, but you're going to have to pay for it. I said, what if it's not my fault? Well, then we'll pay for it. The apartment was never hooked up. They never hooked it up. So after 2 or 3 hours going back and forth, they finally had gotten somebody who actually came out, was not scheduled to come up, but came out that day, did extra just so that he could make it out. And when he discovered it, he was embarrassed. They got it all up and it was running. So that was my first experience. But now I've had a few outages since then. Now, how do I say this? I work from home. So if Spectrum is out for 24 hours and they have to give you a rebate if you ask it, it's going to be small dollars. But since I work from home, I have a lot more cost than that. I either have to work later that day or I have to give up some of my vacation time because a Spectrum outage is not my company's fault. So it costs, even for a couple of hours, it costs, I believe, the user, especially if they work from home, a lot more money. And therefore, it's a concern to me. And I really need my internet to work all the time when I'm working because that is my lifeline. The other thing is that I think it's a mistake that you don't have them recording the phone calls. Because I know I'm not going to think to write a letter. I'm going to call up the phone. And then when it's done, I'm like, okay. So I believe your statistics would be a lot higher in the failure rate if that happened. So I just wanted to point that out. But the fact is that if I don't have internet, especially during work hours, and I know it's going to sound weird, but I actually work at 3:30 in the morning on until later in the day because I service some of our customers. I do internal customer service for my company, and some of them are overseas, so I service them in the morning. And other days, I work normal hours, and therefore I'm working till 4 or 5. But if I'm working till 4 or 5, and then now I have a 2-hour outage, which has happened, then I'm working till 7 or 8, and that is just not fun. So that's why I found out about this. I wanted to come here tonight because the individual person needs, I needed you to know that the individual person like me, there's a cost to them being out. They don't get a cost if it's under 24 hours. They still get to charge us full price. But we have a cost. We incur a cost because of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Others that want to add information? Yes, sir.
Thanks. My name's Tom Spinks, and I live at 34 Woodburn Street. Been here since 2002, and I came in a few minutes late, so are there Spectrum representatives on this panel tonight? Okay. Oh, okay. Well, let's see, I guess it was about 50 minutes ago. I was on the internet, and I just noticed it was really slow. And I'm not going to try and be redundant to the prior folks that have already spoken. So I took a Spectrum speed test, and the download speed was 53.9 megabits per second. And I don't usually worry about the upload speed, not concerned with that much. So I called the tech and got through to a person who looked at the system and said, "Oh, we're going to send a tech out," and but prior to her saying that, she had me, undo the router and plugged it back in after about 12 seconds, and she did a reset on the wireless. I said, "Oh, okay," and she said, "Okay, now take a speed test and tell me what you get." So I did the Spectrum speed test. It came up 105.99 megabits per second. I said, "Wow, this is amazing. Great. That's what we were paying for, ever since we started with Spectrum." So I went back to the desktop and clicked on one of my icons for, I guess it was Google, come to think of it, because I needed to do a search. I'm also a researcher in different aspects of academia. And I said, "This is slow. What's going on here?" And so I did a speed test again, and it came up pretty much with 53.9 megabits per second. So I called back and I got another tech. And she went through the system and said, "Oh, we're going to need to send a tech out tomorrow between 9 and 10. And I said, "Fine, okay." Now I got to move all my stuff just so somebody can come in and check this all out. And it's kind of frustrating. It just is. And I'm speaking for everybody here, I'm sure, with the headaches and the frustration. Yeah. So one question I have is, what's the difference between buffering and streaming? And I guess another question that I have, and I'll just throw this out, is there a push from Spectrum to connect people with fiber optic? I guess that's all I have. Thank you.
Anyone else want to add information? Jim? We're back on the west side now.
Jim Hogenkamp at 90 Felt Road, corner of Hurricane, just up the street from Rod Parsons. I want to share with you August 4. At about 5:25, Deb had called Spectrum and was told that they'll reboot and we should have TV in 20 minutes. Now, at that point, I checked the thermometer, it was 81 degrees, a small breeze. Sky is partly cloudy, but a hot afternoon, high in the 80s. Last night, slice of the moon and the stars were out. It was a great night. So that to me says we didn't have a weather issue. Same night, instead of 5:25, it's now 6 p.m. No TV, so we've gone beyond the 20 minutes that we were told. Same screen message, unable to tune into this channel. If you need further help, and what I wrote down was what was on the screen, means nothing to me, but STBA 3802. So whatever that refers to, I have no idea. Now at 7:59, 2.5 hours after the 20-minute promise, it's the same issue, no TV, can't tune in any channels. Deb calls again and finds out, oh, they're working on it this time. Many others, the message we got was many others in the area are also having the issue. 9:06, finally have football on. Now, I don't really care about 24-hour notice. I don't watch TV 24 hours a day, only when I want it. And I pay for that service 24/7. I expect it to be there, and it's not. Now, you suggested that there is a Spectrum employee here in the room. I'd like to share a little bit with you on the finances of this. We had full service starting in March 7, 2019, and our cost at that point was $109. It's gone up 10 times since March 7, a little over 3 years, 10 times. Now, I'd like that employee of Spectrum to share how many pay raises he's had in that time frame. I suspect it's not 10. Even now, of those 10, you keep looking at that. 109 in March 2019. April of this year, we're now at 196. 85% in round numbers. Is that reasonable? That's worse than what we're seeing coming out of Congress right now. Thank you.
Anybody else that has additional information that can add to this for us? Okay,
I want to explain one.
sure.
In my research dealing with this pixelated situation, something very odd happened. I turned on the Spectrum app, which of course, as you know, is a streaming app. It didn't pixelate on that. It only pixelated on the cable channels. And I think that's an important point to understand, which brings me back to my suggestion, and I hope you follow through, getting somebody who knows something and then look at what the Spectrum system is. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom, or Mr. Trudeau?
I just want to mention that we talk about sports, but it is on the other channels, 38, 39, 40, it all picoulates. And what Bill said, it isn't on the streaming pad, it's on the cable pad.
Okay. So it's really not our expectation that we're going to have a complete answer to all this, but the Spectrum folks have asked that they be able to come back with some other folks, but the representatives here this evening, you've heard a lot from us, a few comments, and would you kind of outline for us what your plan is to be able to work with us to come up with a resolution here?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. My name is John Marr. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for Charter Spectrum. I've listened to all these issues tonight. We take every customer seriously. We want all of our customers to be happy. Obviously, there's a lot of people in this room that are not happy. Our AVP is committed to come to your next meeting on September 8th and address what he is planning to do for the city of Keene to make these improvements. People are frustrated with the customer service, and that's understandable. So we want every customer to be happy. It's not good business unless every customer is happy. So we ask that you put us back on the agenda for September 8th. I've taken copious notes tonight of all that has been said. I'm going to pass that on to our AVP. He could not make it here tonight. We got short notice for this meeting, so he wanted to come tonight to address it, but he asked that we come back on September 8th and address the issues in more detail. I'm not a technical guy, so I know a lot about the business, but I can't answer questions like he can.
Let me explain for all the folks that come this evening. They don't want to hear from me. The way that the city council is able to deal with issues, someone brings it forward, addresses the city council. In this case, one of the councilors wrote a letter to the city council meeting that's held twice a month. Receive that to get it into our system for us to act upon it and assign it to this particular committee. And when it comes to this committee, there are a number of issues that we might do. We might do more research. We might be able to act upon what's going on that particular topic that evening. But we don't make a final decision. We're only 1/3 of the group, the 15 members of the city council. And so it would go back to the city council for a final adjudication or put it on more time or continue it. So that's why you're not seeing us say, well, this is what's going to happen tonight. Even if we had an answer, if he was Mr. Fix-It and had it all taken care of for us, it would still go back to city council, and the rest of the city council would weigh in on it, and if they agree, it would be passed. So what's going to happen is we're going to put it on more time, which means it's go back on our agenda. The next city council meeting will see that it's on more time, so they won't expect that they're going to take any action in a week. But then 2 weeks from this evening, when the FOP finance meeting, they'll be back, and we'll have another discussion. You're welcome to come and weigh in again or listen to their response. And if we come to a solution that is going to go forward to the city council, then we'll send it at that point in time. Thanks to everybody for coming. Appreciate your time. And as you can see, there's a lot of interest on our part up here, and there's a lot of interest on his part. He wants to be able to come back and be able to get out of town, so.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Need a motion?
Yep. Move to recommend the communication be placed on more time to allow representation from Spectrum officials at the next regular meeting.
And I second.
Thank you. So that's September 8th at 6 p.m.? Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm happy to talk to folks out in the hall and I'll talk to them.
They're close the doors.
Comprehensive housing needs analysis. Community director.
Good evening, councilors. Jesse Rounds, Community Development Director. Just coming before you to ask that you forward this to the authorize the city council and the city manager to negotiate and execute a contract with Keene Associates to support, to provide consulting services for our neighborhood, or sorry, for our housing needs analysis.
Thank you. We have a lot of distractions this evening. Now you're okay. So this evening, we are looking for the council's authorization so that I may be able to move forward and execute a contract on this very important project. We are looking to do an analysis of our housing, the types of housing that we have, the affordability of housing, where we may have gaps in some of our housing stock, so that we can make informed strategies from that data. And so this is something, if you remember a couple of years ago, we did this informally in the Community Development Department, but this is taking it to a different level. And I think that the work that we'll be doing is timed well with the work that Southwest Regional Planning Commission will also be doing, because they are looking at same issue but region-wide.
Questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what do we get at the, like, what's the output from this? It's like a packet or a report? Okay. I just, it's always like 45,000 is like about the price for a report every time. So I'm just wondering, like, is there like a $20,000 version of the report versus a 45,000? No, it is.
So initially, this is the second time we went out for proposals for this project.
Okay.
The first time we went out for proposals with a budget of 30,000 and got no responses. We reached out to several consultants to find out why we didn't get any proposals, and the cost was not high enough. So we did need to increase the budget. So you have really two choices. We could significantly reduce the scope of work, and then we could reduce the budget associated with it. But if we want to get this level of information, we really do need the $45,000 budget.
Right. Just to add, we are seeking grant funding to support part of this, because we recognize it is an increase.
So we have no counselors in the audience, and we have no other, just staff, so no need to wait for comments there. We'll take a motion.
All right. Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute a professional services contract with Keene Associates for consulting services for an amount not to exceed $45,000. In the event that negotiations with the preferred vendor are not successful, the city manager is authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute a professional services contract with Stantec Consulting Services Incorporated for an amount not to exceed $45,000.
Second.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, councilors. My name is Brent Rusnock. I'm a civil engineer with the City of Keene Public Works Department. I asked Don if I could present this tonight instead of him, because this is my project that I'm managing and I get to enjoy it. So we are here to request authorization for a change order for our construction engineering consultant. This is the firm that oversees the work that our construction contractor is performing on the project. And the project has been completing. It's been progressing well, and we're nearing completion, and our projected end date is actually next Friday, September 2nd. The project's been going well, and due to a contract time extension request from our contractor, which we believe to be legitimate and valid, we need to offer our consultant a little bit of extra funding to oversee the work properly. And so that's the purpose of this change order.
Questions from members of the committee? I do. And I guess I fully understand what we're facing with so many contractors and inability to get personnel and parts, material. But this one's gone on a little bit longer, and I've had an opportunity to watch it 2 or 3 times a day. And here's how I see it. You got 3 days to get sidewalks before school opens. And the contractor does a hell of a good job leaning up against the truck all day today. So I'm a little concerned that we may be going to extend his contract and somebody's going to get some money to watch them watching nothing. And we're not going to have sidewalks for next Wednesday morning when the kids are going to school. So there's my message to you. Something's got to happen.
Okay.
This is not, in my mind, it's not acceptable, A, because it's hard-earned money on our part, and B, it kind of affects people I know very well that got to get to school.
Can you explain a little bit in more detail of where
You
that was
don't-
happening?
West Street, all the way down West Street, West Street, not all the way down West Street, but all the way down Park Avenue. You're going to redo the sidewalks at every intersection. They're all dug up, and there actually is a safety issue the way they are now. And school starts next Wednesday. And apparently, they say they can't get flaggers. Well, those 4 guys leaning up against the truck could have helped out flagging. I'm not going to tell them how to do their job. I'm just saying, as a citizen, as a taxpayer, that really doesn't look good. And unfortunately, it's my opportunity to speak tonight.
No, I appreciate that, and there should be no excuse for a contractor wasting time on a job, especially if the prime contractor is requesting more time. And that's something that I will certainly plan to bring to the contractor and their subcontractor immediately, because school starting and the sidewalks are an important feature, and that's why we started the sidewalk rehabilitation program this year. And so we know it's an important issue for the community, and I'm certainly happy to share that with our contractor and make them accountable.
Thank you. Any further discussion? So we need a motion.
Move to recommend the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute a contract change order with Greenman Peterson, Inc. for an amount not to exceed $4,000, subject to NHDOT approval. Funding is to be provided by Project Cost Center 75J005A 300 054 1020.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion by members of the committee? Seeing none, all in favor? No one opposed, unanimous. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councilors.
Item number 4, Municipal Services Agreement, Keene State College, City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I talk about that, I want to say I've seen the engineering department holding contractors responsible. I witnessed it firsthand. We have a project out back here behind City Hall where if you've noticed, we had some new stairs built. They were not built to specification. Those contractors are redoing that work right now. So they will take what you say to heart. They do hold our contractors responsible for their actions. So tonight, I wanted to talk a little bit about the municipal services agreement that we have with Keene State College. And for a number of years, we have just continued the same agreement. And initially, we continued the same agreement because the college was going through a lot of restructuring related to their budget, was not prepared to really negotiate a new agreement. Then we went into COVID. They continued to have changes, and I am quite comfortable renewing the agreement because I do believe there's pressure to actually reduce the amount of money that they're paying to us. And although that's not been said, that's something that would take a long time for us to negotiate. So in the meantime, we're hoping to hold things steady with the same agreement that we've had in place for several years now, and that agreement provides significant payments to the city. We receive just about $497,000 for life safety services, so mostly for fire safety services as negotiated in the agreement. we receive just over $136,000 for a police officer that's funded by the college, and that officer has duties that relate to the relationship and the on-campus activity. So it's the liaison between the college and the city. We also have, if you remember, the social host position. So that position is a part-time position that's 50-50 funded by the college and the city. And that is about $14,500. In addition to that, the college pays $10,000 towards prosecution. And lastly, there's an escrow account of just over $7,000 that's held for any disturbances that might arise in the off-campus neighborhoods that we would have to address. So as you can see, that's significant funds to the city, and I'd love to be able to renew this agreement again. Melinda Treadwell and I, the president, we have a lot of conversations about different things, and we have really formed a great partnership. And there are lots of things that we could enter in that are not into this agreement of how we work cooperatively together between the city and the college. And so I do think in the next agreement, when we really substantially change that agreement, there'll be more innovative partnerships that we'll be able to articulate in the agreement as well. But for right now, we'd like to continue to extend the one we have.
Members of the committee? Yes, sir.
One quick question on my part. For water and sewer services to the college, are they just any old ratepayer?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anything else? Could I get a motion, please?
Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee moves to recommend that the attached Fifth Amendment to Municipal Service Agreement between the City of Keene and Keene State College be forwarded to the City Council, with a recommendation to authorize the city manager to extend the term of the agreement for 1 additional year.
Second.
Any further discussion? Members of the committee? In that case, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Item number 5 is parking ordinance.
Mr. Chairman, looks like you have a lot of spare time tonight. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, fellow members of the committee. With me tonight is Chelsea North, Parking Services Manager. We did state in the strategic parking plan as well as our budget statements that we'd be filing some fee increases. What is before you tonight is modest increases with no planned increases beyond meter fees and tickets. In the future, we may be submitting for other changes to the system itself, but no further adjustment planned for fees in the immediate future. Suggesting fee increases is always difficult for staff, and the subject can be hard for the City Council. And a lot of that reason is, quite frankly, because of the periodicity of when we talk about the fees and when we talk about increases in fees. One time period, for example, between that conversation was 13 years, and that's just a bit too long to have any discussions on fees. Suggesting changes is consistent with City Council goals to diversify revenue, to improve fiscal stability, as well as the adopted fiscal policy. In other words, per the fiscal policy, we should be bringing information back to the City Council, which is exactly what we're doing, to make sure our revenue accounts are up to date and are doing what they're supposed to do. Parking Services intends to revisit fees with some review and, if needed, adjustment for some part of the system on a biannual basis, trying to actually put this on a regular footing. The last time we had conversation about fees was related to the rental fees for our parking structures. Okay. Adjustment of the system on a biannual basis is defined in City Council fiscal policy. Evaluation of fees on a biannual basis allows for adjustment without the greater increases that you have with this periodic review that we're doing now. You look at fees every 5 years, they're much higher than you would be if you were looking at it on a regular basis. The need to have balanced fees is to ensure that revenue can match expenses and adopted city policy. Fees are used to preserve the operating system as well as the maintenance of our downtown, as well as parking infrastructure. You have to remember that a lot of what we do with the money we collect from meter fees and parking fees is the maintenance of downtown. It's the restriping of downtown. It's plowing snow in downtown. You also have a situation where downtown has actually expanded. When you look at the land development code itself, we've added territory to where the city has a responsibility for parking services itself. So you have a general need to be up to date. You have a general need to keep the revenue account solid, and we'll hear a little bit more about that. And with that, Chelsea has just a couple of quick slides.
I suppose you get to read my notes along with my slideshow, because I don't know how to change the view here. Let's see. Yep. One moment. Thank you. Thank you, Nick, I think. Okay. The parking budget is projected to be in a negative balance by fiscal year '24, so next July, if the rates stay the same. The last negative balance was in 2020, although each year it becomes more difficult to balance because of the various losses in revenue and increase in costs. Major revenue losses include the debt service for TIF districts and the courthouse tax payments amounting to about $370,000. If the parking budget did not pay for downtown services that include maintenance, lighting, landscaping, snow removal, etc., as Med explained, the cost would have to be passed on to Keene taxpayers. This is contrary to City Council goals of minimizing the burden of the Keene taxpayer, leading to an increase in property taxes or suspension of the services. Regular evaluation of fees in line with City Council's fiscal policy makes a rate increase predictable and manageable, and will limit sharp jumps in rates. Sharp increases are a result of not regularly evaluating rates on a consistent schedule. Operational and material expenses are increasing due to rapidly rising costs. An expanded downtown core district and downtown growth district means there's more area to upkeep with the parking fund, which may result in some work not being completed because of limited resources and personnel. The addition of expenses such as replacement and maintenance of EV chargers also influences increased operating costs. Raising ticket fees has been part of the strategic strategic parking plan, thank you, written in 2021. Fees and rates have not been increased in nearly 4 years, and even then the amount was nominal. The City Council historically has asked staff to show what other communities charge for fees. Other New Hampshire cities and towns have long exceeded the amount that Keene charges for parking. As stated in the strategic parking plan, Parking Services is routinely evaluating the parking system to determine what operational direction and parking demand is needed and how it is used. This evaluation of the system includes regular evaluation of fees and how they're used. Also included in the strategic parking plan is the further expansion of pay stations, which allow for the use of credit cards and coins, as traditional meters are no longer available and irreplaceable. The pay stations have been quite successful in front of City Hall and the library, and have been recently expanded to other areas in Main Street and Railroad Square, and we expect that the success will continue to trend that way. We are also working on adding another mobile app which will increase the options to pay for parking. These technologies open up far more possibilities and options for system management than a meter-only system. These upgraded technologies allow for whitelisting, further allowing the possibility to offer a different meter rate to Keene taxpayers, which Parking Services is researching the operational feasibility of that program now. So what we are proposing is to increase on-street and off-street meter rates by 15 cents an hour. These amounts will be easier for customers to calculate the amount of parking that they need and not more or less. The ticket fees are proposed to be raised by $5. Late fee schedules will also be adjusted to double twice on a 30-day schedule, making the fee schedule consistent and easy to understand. And if these proposals are adopted, we anticipate to have them effective as of January 1st of 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like Mary Howe, our Finance Director, to come up and make a couple of brief statements.
Absolutely. She tried to hide back there.
Good evening, Mary Howe, Finance Director. To go over briefly the finances of the parking fund, we always look at fund balance. Fund balance is equivalent as in the private sector retained earnings. So with future projects coming down the pike with the parking garage and bond funding, you really want to have a strong fund balance, retained earnings, in order to move it forward, to get the best rate that you can get. So right now, the fund balance for the start of this fiscal year is looking approximately to be $395,000. Cash-funded CIP projects over the next 7 years is anticipated to be $1,050,000, leaving a fund balance shortfall, if you break even, of $655,000. So in order not to be in the hole, you really need to raise your income each year to nearly $100,000. And roughly, we've been averaging between $40,000 and $60,000 a year in profit on good years. So in order to support future plans, and these numbers that I gave you were just CIP cash-funded projects. It does not account for any increase in debt service or operations. So in order to support moving forward, the numbers that they've put forward in their projections on the anticipated increases in the meter fees will help support the funding necessary over the next 7 years to meet your needs and your plans in the CIP. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mary? We don't have any debt service right now, right?
You have small. There is a debt service in there right now.
All right.
We still have a little bit of Norway Ave, 93rd Street. So it's small, but then we'll be issuing another bond in a couple years for the design. And then, and actually I believe we have a $555,000 bond for FY23 as well for the repair and maintenance of the decks.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Thank you. What's the actual dollar impact of this, of 15 cents per hour and for the $5? Do we have like the projected actual impact of this change?
You mean how much it would increase the revenue?
For next year.
Chelsea, do you want to answer that?
I think I have that information. I just don't have it with me tonight. That's something I'd be happy to revisit and get back to you.
I'm very hesitant, especially on the fees side, because we have areas of town now where there are no meters and no stations, and you have to know to use the app. And I've now grabbed 5 or 6 tickets from people in that area and just paid them because they didn't know what to do and they didn't know how to pay the meters and they didn't realize there was meters. So I'm hesitant to raise the meter, especially while the fees for Park Mobile itself are very high to actually pay to use the mobile app. And there's still a lot of confusion around how to use, especially the areas with no stations. I appreciate that we're using the stations in certain areas, and I honestly think they work well, they work great, but I don't know how we're defining success of them rolling out. Like, I know we said they're successfully rolling out, but I don't know what the customer feedback side of that is. I know I get mixed feedback if people have to walk or other pieces, but yeah, I know the paying through the app piece is incredibly expensive, so it's making me hesitant to raise the fees or raise the rates until we figure out how to fix the fee side on Park Mobile. but I don't know if, yeah. Yeah, and then you just eat the fee, but it's the same thing, right? It's, yeah. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's it. I'm just,
Yeah, I think that the proposed increases are reasonable. I would like to know the number of, how much that would increase when you mentioned the deficit now, and if we agree to this fee schedule, how much it would get us closer to the goal. Then the other thing is, my concern is changing the times. Monday through Saturday, currently it's 8 to 5, and changing a Monday through Saturday 10 to 7. That's not a bad idea at all, because it's so busy at night when people are downtown enjoying dinner out. But what I found, or I could see as being potentially confusing for people, is that changing it in the winter, I also understand why you would do that, but changing it back to 8 to 5, and I'm assuming the meters would be marked so that people would realize that it's changing in the winter time. But, I think that would be just a bit of a bump in the road initially for people. I don't know if there's something you would suggest to make it a easy transition for people to adjust to.
So we recognize the changing landscape of our downtown. We do, and we're in pretty constant communication with our businesses on Main Street, and we know how they've been receptive to the pay stations, for example. We also do talk to people on the street on a regular basis to get some idea how things are going with them. And, we hear things too, like the city council does, and we do our best to work with those things. We have people who live downtown. We have more people who are living downtown. That's a whole different way of looking at things. We have people who work downtown, and that's a different consideration that we have to look at. Historically, when we've looked at downtown parking, it's been with Main Street in mind and a shopping environment. It's very different now than it's been in the past, and we're trying to work through that. Changing our hours is an operational issue that we're challenged with. Frankly, I'm concerned about our parking officers being out after dark, and how we would do that. I am also aware of and thinking about how we would deal with the confusion of changing hours, how that would work. We also anticipate that our lots would be on different hours than Main Street, because our lots are primarily people who, there's some visitors, but a lot of them are people who are working in our downtown, and that's a very different consideration. We're being honest with the council and letting the council understand what we're thinking and what the challenges are. We know that on Main Street especially, we're going to have to shift hours if we're going to maintain any flow in the parking availability. The parking lots themselves are a different problem. They're a different way of doing things. I don't have a clean answer for you on how we're going to manage the change in time if we try to manage it winter, summer. I just don't know how we're going to do that yet. I think changing it in general, the operational side of Main Street from 10 to 7 or 10 to 6 or 10 to 6:30 is just easier. But that means we're going to have some period of time when we're going to have to work in the darkness a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. Brian, did you have this?
Yeah, just I guess a quick comment for us, and I think it's important for us to have a conversation around the times, around whether or not the pay stations are feasible and what that rollout looks like, but with consideration for the budgetary issues. I want to make sure we're focused on addressing the rates that are in front of us. I'd be happy to have conversations at another time about what, how we make sure that the pay stations are working as we intend for them to. But, I think these are reasonable rates, puts us in line with other cities, and I think it makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we want to answer that question first before we get into any other discussions? Do we have an answer?
Yes. So the difference in the meter budget would be $62,000 per year. So that's a change from 85 cents an hour to $1 an hour. The difference in the lot budget is $35,000 a year. So that's $97,000 increase in revenue.
Thank you, sir. So that number alone pays for the 655 gap. That 15 cents more than pays for the gap.
Add though. May I? I agree, it would pay for the gap, and I think that's how we were initially modeling this. However, it does not take away from the need to continually adjust your rates because your operational budget will continue. I mean, the gap that we're trying to meet right now is to make sure that we have a model that will fund our capital projects into the future. However, we know that the cost of doing business is not going to decrease. So looking at some sort of incremental changes, whether it's every other year, whatever the time frame might be, I think is a good suggestion because it would save us from making these larger adjustments later.
Thanks, sir. Yeah, so I would say I'm supportive of the meter rate increases. The reason I bring up things like how well the pay stations are working and things like that is because I think there are people getting tickets right now that just don't realize how it works and get frustrated with it, which is why I'm hesitant on raising the fee structure on the tickets. I appreciate that if you just pay them, then you don't get tickets, so it doesn't, if you pay the meters, you don't get tickets, but I think there are, especially the one that I've seen multiple times is down by Brewbakers on the street down there. There's a section where there's nothing and it's pay only by app. And that's, I can't remember. It's at least 3. I think it's 5 though, that I've taken tickets from people and like just paid them because they didn't know what to do. They didn't realize it was metered. And that part for me, for increasing the rates, the fees are going to grow on Park Mobile because they're percentage based. I'm not a huge fan of that.
There's nothing more emotional than a parking ticket.
That is true.
It's a tough discussion for us, but we need to have it. And part of the reason we're almost in a deficit situation is we neglected maintenance for too many years because we wanted to save money, and some councils were very hesitant to raise rates or even establish a rate that was reasonable. And I think part of it was because historically it wasn't a big part of how business operates in the downtown. But we're in a different world. We're in a total different world. And we really need to do something because we're going to be facing a lot of expenses. The cost of doing business and not maintaining things because we don't have the money is really not the answer. So, the 15 cents doesn't seem like a lot to me. And I understand the discussion about people don't understand the stuff because remember, you're talking to a guy that doesn't have a smartphone, so I'm either going to have to walk but times are changing everywhere. And we have to face that our particular meters, they're gone. There are other ways to address it, but we've got to change. And we've got to continue this. We've got to continue this discussion. I, for one, don't think 15 cents is enough, but it's acceptable. Yes, ma'am.
So I would tend to agree with Councilor Remy in that the change in the meter rates and the lot rates, I think, are definitely needed to offset the deficit that we'll be facing in terms of how much we are funding in our capital plan, and that is from deferred maintenance. The parking tickets are really meant to change behavior. They're not a revenue generator. We don't give people a ticket to try and balance our budget. They are meant to change behavior. And so I think that we do have, I didn't talk to the parking department about this, but we do have, time. We could come back and relook at the parking ticket fee in the future separately, should we need to.
Can I also add that some of the feedback that I've received since I've gotten here, and I know this may be anecdotal in some ways, we've had a lot of people who've moved to Keene who come here frequently from bigger cities and other areas who actually think that $10 a day for parking somewhere, getting a parking ticket and not paying the meter is actually an excellent deal. And it's something that we see people taking advantage of, quite frankly. And with the $15 proposed ticket amount, we have not increased the late fee schedule on that one. We've actually kept it where it currently is, just to make it, make it easier with the late fee schedule. But we are trying to, as the city manager said, we are trying to drive people to pay the meters and pay for parking. And we've had a lot of success with the pay stations, and they actually open up a lot of options for people who do not want to use the apps because they allow credit cards, whereas the meters did not before. And specifically in the area where you're speaking of on Emerald Street, we didn't really have a choice to put meters back there because unfortunately they were stolen. And as I had mentioned, we can't replace the meters. And that's just kind of where we're at with those right now. So while we understand there are areas that are not suitable for pay by app only, sometimes our hands are a little bit tight in that area.
I also want to speak to the fact that we regularly talk to people who are in a bind or didn't know how to do something or whatever. And we regularly forgive those tickets, quite frankly, when we're convinced that they're telling us the truth. And we'll even take the time to walk them through the process to be sure that they're cognizant of it. So we would actually prefer, Counselor, that you send them to us as opposed to paying their tickets, because we'll help solve the problem.
Further discussion? Yes, ma'am.
It's possible that this has been discussed in previous conversations, but in the event that it hasn't, I've used that Park Mobile, and that to me is pricey. Are there other apps that are available that would be competitive with Park Mobile? Have we explored that?
That we have, and this was the second app that Chelsea was talking about. There are other apps out there. We want to add an additional app which has different cost structure, different conditions. I know Councilor Remini in the past has talked about the fact that with Park Mobile, when you start a session, let's say you're having dinner and you paid for an hour and your dinner is running over and you need to pay for another hour, well, you get charged an additional fee for doing that, right? The app that we're looking at least as I understand it, and Chelsea will correct me, obviously, if I'm wrong, doesn't collect the fee till you're actually done, so that you could add time to that. And it's about the same cost structure, if I remember. And there might be other apps that are available out there. Every other city of any consequence in New Hampshire that we've talked to, Portsmouth, Nashua, Concord, et cetera, has at least 2 apps available. Sometimes they have 3. So we're going to continue to add, because quite frankly, that is the future. The future is paying for your parking on an app. It's even paying for more than that potentially with some of these apps where, if we get into a more managed system, you can reserve parking spaces, you can buy tickets for the Colonial. There's a lot more that we could do. We can help some of the private property owners also in renting out some of their spaces basically through an app. So there's a whole other world that we're going to go into from here.
And one other thing, I think these are reasonable, even the ticket ones. I know that was a big deal last time, and we got a lot of pushback from the public. I haven't heard anything thus far this time with it being on the agenda. Before it was a very hot subject. But, and this helps us to reach our goal. My question is that you had suggested that what we're looking at right now is like an immediate increase, but you had suggested something where we would have an increase on an annual perhaps basis. And so are you planning to come back with another proposal after this, or?
So I believe Med mentioned in his opening remarks that what we were looking at is potentially a change in the fiscal policy that talks about biannual adjustment to the rates and we haven't quite figured it out, so I'm not sure what that would look like, but something that would allow us to change on a more regular basis. And I think that the challenge with that is, especially with, meter rates, and it might be an odd number and then rounding it. So there's some work that we would have to do to figure out what that would look like. But in the future, what we are talking about is a more automated system to make sure that we're more frequently reviewing the rates to make sure that they're in line with the budget and the capital plan so that larger adjustments aren't necessary in the future.
And I want to follow up a little bit on that with the city manager, just for ratification, something I didn't know when we did it the last time around. And, with the electronic systems, it's pretty easy to reprogram it, right? You just reprogram it. With the meters, it's not so easy. You have to go in by hand and literally set it. And the system that we have now, when we went to 85 cents an hour, just think about how you divide up nickels, dimes, quarters, et cetera, in that meter, and how you adjust the times in those regards. So round numbers is a lot easier, especially when we have these mechanical systems to actually make it work. So you're probably going to be looking at round numbers on an annualized basis or a biannualized basis to try to keep your fees in sync with your budgeting goals, which we haven't done that good of a job at, quite frankly, in years past.
Could I put maybe Chelsea on the spot?
Okay.
Well, I want to probe the parking ticket question a little bit more, the parking fee, ticket fee. So one of the concerns, you're right, I've heard the same thing, that some people will just ignore it because it's cheaper for them. They'll just park all day and they'll get the $10 ticket versus paying for the meter fee. If we give someone a ticket, is that it for the day? So they wouldn't get until the next day, so would they potentially?
Not necessarily. I mean, there are the expired meter or non-payment of the meter, but there's also the overtime. So there's a potential that people could be getting 2 or more tickets depending on what the violation would be. And even then, we have heard feedback from people who've just paid those tickets saying, you know what, $20 is just fine. As long as I can park exactly where I want to and I don't need to move, that's just fine with me. I know that's not everybody, but we do actually hear that quite often.
My only thought in that case is at that point, the city's actually making more on that than they would have off the meters. And from a budgetary perspective, I don't know.
But it's tying up the space, and that's the whole idea.
It's tying up the space, and that's one of the reasons why Portsmouth has experimented with demand parking. And basically there is a maximum time that you can stay there, but the longer you stay, the higher it goes. We're not quite there yet.
Just so everybody, I think for the most part, everybody in the room here has got a good idea of this whole system and what we're facing, but many other counselors may not have all the information or get the same information as they hear these issues, and the public, they see it in a whole different way. We say the meters, they're not available, they're done, but that doesn't mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't mean we're out of if the majority of the council is to say, well, we gotta have meters, we can still do meters, but it's a whole new type of meter, and it's got a lot of, probably more whiz-bang things.
The pay stations are technically multimeters. That's actually what they are. But I can tell you the arc of technology, as we go down the road, you're even going to see the pay stations disappear, but probably not for 10 to 15 years, quite frankly. So as we, we have a capital improvement project right now to buy more pay stations. We're gonna have to figure out how many of them that we buy and when we buy them vis-a-vis our downtown project. Do we wait on the downtown until we actually do the project? Do we put them in now, realizing they have to be relocated? So there's some conversation to be had. But it's fully our intention in the downtown, where we can, where it makes sense, because a pay station isn't suitable for every place, to replace the meters with pay stations. So there will be an opportunity to pay on 2 apps. There will also be a possibility on the pay station to pay with a credit card, to pay with coins, to pay with a prepaid card. However we work that out, there'll be a number of different opportunities. But there's some areas where we're gonna leave meters. And as we take meters off of the street and replace them with pay stations, that gives us meters in stock, if you wanna look at it that way. And we can keep using those meters in stock until the technology catches up entirely and people don't use the pay stations or the coins or anything anymore. Very few people use coins anymore, and very few people don't use the apps. That's one of the favorite ways of doing it, especially if you're from out of town. I often hear people from out of town, literally states to the south of us, that when they're looking at the pay station or looking at the meters, they're talking to each other about which app they have on the phone and which app does the city take. So we're joining the 21st century.
Anything else up here? We have a proposed ordinance on the table here. You comfortable going forward with it? Somebody got a motion then?
Move to recommend the adoption of ordinance O/2022-08.
And I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion, members of the committee? Seeing none, all in favor? Anyone opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you, committee, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And then item number 6, we're going to deal with that at our next rotation, so I need to get somebody, I guess, Andrew, it's your turn to make a motion to. Move to.
So we are doing that motion?
No, we're doing this motion to move it, put it on more time. Okay.
So just move to.
Put it on more time.
Move to recommend the adoption of ordinance 0/2022-10 be put on more time. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's good.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Thanks to all. It's been a fun night. We're adjourned.
I was remodeling our charges for if we did.